A very good morning to all of you. In our last lecture, we got introduced with one of the structuralists and post-structuralists, Michel Foucault. We are going to study an essay by Michel Foucault. The title of the essay is "What is an author?" It is in the form of question. The title of this particular literary essay is in the form of a question. What is an author? So as we know, an author, we understand, is someone who writes a book. Okay, generally, we say who is the author. But here, Michel Foucault is raising the question related to the authorship itself. What is an author? Not who is an author. Okay. So he tries to understand the concept of author itself. So let's uh, get acquainted with Foucault's ideas, his primary concern in this particular essay. We have already got introduced with Michel Foucault. He was not a Freudian, he didn't follow Sigmund Freud, or he wasn't a Marxist, socialist, or structuralist, a literary theorist, but he was a post-structuralist. Okay, means we should understand this particular fact about Michel Foucault. We should understand that he was not a Freudian, Marxist, socialist, structuralist, or a literary theorist, but a post-structuralist thinker. And he draws an ideas and assumptions from these particular thinkers from different fields. He draws ideas from Freud, Karl Marx, socialist thinkers, and even the structuralists. Okay, means even from the literary theory, he gets ideas for his post-structuralist ideology or post-structuralist conceptualization of the things. So, what I said, he draws an ideas and assumptions from all these fields and all these people. According to Michel Foucault, his primary concern, is not to analyze the concept of authors throughout the ages, but to show their relationship with the text. So this is his concern. His concern is to analyze the concept of authors, not only at the present time, but throughout the ages. Means it's a kind of diachronic diachronic study. Okay, it's a kind of diachronic or historical study. Means he's trying to understand the concept of authors as understood historically. Okay, means that is not his concern, I mean to say, but to show their relationship with the text. He does not take the historical account as such, but he tries to understand the relationship. He tries to figure out how a text points out to a figure who is outside, okay, and proceeds with it. Actually, the author is outside the text, and he tries to understand this author who is outside. Because when you read a book, when you read a text, what we do is to read, we read a story written by that author, but we do not know about this author. He is rather outside, means in the case of autobiography, the author's story is being told, but in other cases, the author remains outside. So he points out to this particular figure who is outside and continues with this particular idea. Now, when we talk about the title of this particular literary essay by Foucault, The title itself, per se, means itself, is indicative of Foucault being provocative. Means he's trying to be provocative. He provokes. To provoke means to make people to do something by action, by what we call words, by actions. For example, we make someone angry. That is by uh, you know um, by certain remarks. So that is provocative, being provocative. You insulting remarks, etc. So the title itself is provocative. We can see that Foucault is provocative, and he's taking a given point and turning it into a problem. His question, "What is an author?" even might seem pointless at first because we are too much accustomed with the word. We never think about it. We just say who is the author of this book. We never say what is an author. We are so accustomed with the word. We have become so accustomed to thinking about authors and authorship. And we never go into this particular question, what is an author? This particular essay is divided into 5 different sections. In the first few paragraphs, which constitute the first section of this particular essay, Foucault responds to some of our most basic assumptions about authorship. Whatever we assume, whatever we take for granted, are our basic assumptions. Okay, and he responds to some of our most basic assumptions about authorship. In the first paragraph, for example, Foucault reminds us that although we regard the concept of authorship as solid and fundamental, means authorship is something solid. For example, when you are asked about William Shakespeare and his writing, so we keep on mentioning his plays. We talk about the number of plays written by William Shakespeare, number of poems, sonnets especially. So all the details we come up with. Yes, this is what miss. As soon as somebody asks you who was William Shakespeare, so you will say he was a British dramatist and is well known for his four tragedies and all. So this is a very solid and fundamental answer. So these concepts, that concept hasn't always existed. Means although we think that it is very solid and fundamental, according to Foucault, it is not something which existed ever. So it came into being. It came into being, he explains, at a particular moment in history, and it may pass out of being at some future moment. So, what he's trying to say is that although we regard the concept of authorship as solid and fundamental, the concept hasn't always existed. Authorship hasn't existed. This is a bit contradictory, a provocative. He said the concept of authorship has never existed or always has not always existed. Instead of saying never. And this came into being at a particular moment in history. And further, what he says, it may pass out of being, out of this existence at some future moment. So he is trying to touch on our tendency to view the concept of authorship as solid. But in addition to that, he also seems to take up a habit of thinking about authors as individuals. Because we say authors are individuals. If I ask you name some of the English authors, names of the English authors, then you will mention certain figures. So that is our assumption, our thinking, our understanding of authorship. We think about authors as individuals, heroic figures who somehow transcend or step outside history. Means they are timeless. We understand them by their writing, by their individual achievements. Then Foucault wonders, why are we so strongly inclined to view authors in that way? He is actually expressing his own surprise over this particular tendency. Why are we so strongly inclined to view authors in the way we perceive? Means view authors as solid and fundamental, authorship as solid and fundamental, or authors as individuals. Why are we so often? Why are we often so resistant to the notion that authors are products of their times? So what Foucault is trying to point out here is that authors are products of their times. That means he's using the modern notion of productivity and all, industrial productivity, you can say. They are the products of their times. Okay. So he is must just playing with this, but and he's taking a challenge. He's doing some kind of jousting here. First, he mixes it up with Rolabat, a very famous literary critic, who had recently proclaimed, might knowing, when you read some post-structuralism, some material on post-structuralism, the reception theory, the response theory, he must have realized that Rolabat declares the date of the author through his book, the same with the same title. So he's trying to bring ideas. He's trying to mix his own thinking with Rolabar, who was a very famous literary critic and who had recently proclaimed the date of the author. According to Foucault, Barthes had urged other critics to realize, means through this particular essay, the date of the author, Barthes had urged other critics to realize that they could do without the author and concentrate on the study of the work itself, or study the work itself. Okay, through these urging, through these requests to other people, other critics, Foucault is trying to imply, suggest directly. Okay, this urging by Foucault sounds a lot more radical than it really is. Means he is denying the notion of author. He is stating that we can do without the author. And second, in the next part, he turns his attention to Derrida, one more post-structuralist. Okay, without ever mentioning, okay, the actually he does not mention his name. He does not talk about Derrida directly. Foucault claims that although Derrida, like Barthes, present his views as radical, they are in truth quite conventional. So actually, he just takes a kind of, he challenges Derrida by calling him conventional. Actually, by knowing Derrida is credited to have started post-structuralism or deconstructionism. I had mentioned that while taking the survey of post-structuralism and post-structuralism with his essay Science, Structure and Play. Okay, he had started the debate, but he calls Derrida's thinking as conventional, not radical. Okay. And he suggests Derrida never really gets rid of the author, although he tries to deconstruct everything, but he's around the author itself. See merely assigns the author's powers and privilege to writing or to language itself. Through his writing, Derrida acknowledges or reassigns the author's powers. He accepts the author's powers and his privileges or her privileges to writing or to language itself. So why does he bother to do all this? That is the question. Who means he means Foucault, because he enjoys a fight partly, and partly because he doesn't want his readers to assume that authorship is a dead issue, a problem that is already being solved by Barth and Derrida. So, what is his aim in this section? Here, his aim is to show that despite of all their bombast, all their showiness, neither Barth nor Derrida has broken away from the question of the author. They haven't been able to solve this question. Means although they declare the date of the author, Barth declares, although Derrida talks about multiple meanings, their focus is on the reader, still they haven't got rid of the authorship. So that is the objection raised by Foucault. We shall go ahead with the next section shortly.